Thank you, everyone. And Roger, Shikhan, let us have your wise words for today.
All right, thank you, Jishin. Today was a special day for me. I reached the 3/4 century mark. 75 years old. I guess I didn't really feel like applauding the fact, but anyway, thank you anyway. So tonight we're talking about your zazen is the zazen of the Buddhas. And I'm remembering I said that in a previous talk, I said that Maezumi Roshi's teaching in this book is very visceral, and he's continuing that spirit tonight, I think, in this chapter. He says that we should have faith that our very life is the realization of Buddha's enlightenment. And I think it's important to point out that faith in Buddhism really is not a belief. It's not about a set of beliefs that we grasp onto. But faith in this way is a state of being. And the best way I've just recently thought of how to express that is that it's faith in our actual experience of our essential being. And it becomes the faith in the actual nature of our essential being in our actual experience itself. So it's not philosophizing about what faith is or what our essential being is. It's our actual experience that brings all of it together. Realizing that state of oneness that Maezumi Roshi is so insistent on reminding us of. So, and he's also telling us, that our essential being is the one thing that we can rely on, although it's not a thing we can perceive or describe. It's our ever-present reality. We can't rely on ourselves clinging because it's always changing. There's that old saying that we get reminded of many times, that you can't step into the same river twice. And this is saying that our sense of being a separate body mind, of sense of being a separate self, is always changing, is being created and is dissolving again and again. So it's not us that is sitting, but Buddha. And Buddha is that ever-present flow of all of our experience together. And I noticed that there may be a couple of new people here tonight, so if what I'm saying seems really far out and difficult to comprehend, you're right, it is. And it's not any easier for me either, except I'm used to talking about it, so it just flows on. So it's not you that's sitting, but Buddha. So another way of saying is that enlightenment, we don't get enlightened, enlightenment gets enlightened. Enlightenment realizes itself through us. And I was going to read something. I wrote a chapter quite a few years ago, actually. It was shortly after Reb Anderson, the previous teacher, the teacher that we just finished studying his book. He came to visit this group way back 15 years ago. And so I wrote this in the chapter. Reb Anderson gave a talk not long ago on our resistance to practice. He said, in spiritual practice, we need to love our resistance until we no longer live in it. Here, love does not necessarily mean to add love to resistance or to try to love it. It means simply to allow the resistance to be. We don't have to love it. We only need to accept it. Through our willingness to embrace Buddha's great compassion, we can let Buddha love our resistance. We let our feelings of I don't want this to saturate this, and becoming the longing, we allow our clinging to ideas about it to dissolve. And this is what we mean in Buddhism when we speak of transparency. We see our actual resistance as a manifestation of Buddha's love. In other words, the boundary between Buddha's acceptance of our suffering and the being that we are begins to dissolve, so we can begin to see both at the same time and begin to see the oneness of the two, that there is no separation. By not abiding in it, we allow our resistance to dissolve. So as we begin to realize that Buddha is accepting our resistance, we begin to not resist the resistance, and it begins to resolve and dissolve. So we could say that transparency means our wanting becomes transparent to Buddha's wanting. And what Buddha really wants is for us to follow the way and to move beyond our suffering with great compassion. So one of the blocks, Maizumi says, to this is when we do Zazen in order to create a certain effect or give rise to certain conditions, he says this is the wrong way to practice. Because what we're striving for, what we're striving to attain is already here. Another way to say that is that, our essential being doesn't need to get liberated because it's already free. Our essential being doesn't need to get liberated, it needs to be recognized. And when we recognize it, we recognize its actual nature. And what Buddha tells us is that its nature is completely limitless. It's the unconditional acceptance of all of our experience, all of our life. It's ever present in the sense we talked about, a couple weeks ago, that here and now have no gaps. We're always here and it's always now. So this becomes our actual experience. And also, our essential being is not stained or harmed by any experience. So it has the freedom to love our resistance, to love our very self. So Maizumi is telling us that, again and again, realization is always here in all its fullness, utterly complete. And attaining enlightenment is just realizing this fact. So until we clarify this matter, he says, you will not be at ease. Maybe you can be comfortable for a while. Oh, sorry, I'm on the wrong page. That was from last week. Where are we at? Okay, yeah, realization or attaining enlightenment is nothing but becoming aware of this fact. This direct and clear fact of our life as the intrinsically enlightened life is difficult to see. How can you practice most effectively in order to realize this? And then he says, one big block, he asks the question, is there an awareness of I am doing koan? I'm working on a certain aspect of the teaching, or I am doing shikantaza with this. Shikantaza is when we sit without any attempt to manipulate any object of our experience. In other words, we just sit in the presence of our awareness, of our presence, without trying to actually do anything. So he's saying one big block to that is thinking that we're self-consciously doing the activity, where the teaching is to be present in the face of non-doing. So I still do this too, is constantly reminding ourselves we don't have to do the non-doing. Non-doing is not doing non-doing. Non-doing is just non-doing. Again, don't be too disturbed if you don't quite get what I'm saying here, because it's difficult. But actually, Rab said something about this awareness of we're doing the meditation in one of his books we haven't studied yet. He says, you really must, and I mean must, and his second must he puts in italics, so he's emphasizing the word. You really must understand that you by yourself cannot do Buddhist meditation. Nobody, no person has ever done Buddhist meditation, but Buddhist meditation has happened to people. It happens to people because various causes and conditions come together, and those people are responsible when it happens. When it's happening, you're able to respond out of that meditation. And if it doesn't happen, that's also a gift, and you're responsible for that too. If the meditation isn't happening, it might be because you think you are doing the meditation. So when you catch yourself doing Buddhist meditation, then confess it. The more you confess that you think you can do Buddhist practice, or walk across the street, or raise your arm, or lift your foot, or cough, the more you melt away the root of the deep misconception that you can do something by yourself. So the heart of Reb's teaching here is that we never are actually doing anything by ourselves because we are so deeply interconnected with all beings. And he actually says that in the book we did study, he'll say that what relieves the suffering, what enables people to move beyond suffering, is the understanding of the deep, deep intimacy we share with all beings. So how do we practice effectively? And Reb says, and Maizumi says also, I think, we allow the offering of all of our experience. We allow the surrendering of the separate self that is always already happening. So we open to the possibilities, infinite possibilities in the face of this great mystery of our existence. And I want to go back to something he said in a really early, what Maizumi said in a really early chapter when he's talking about impermanence. And this is probably the most far out thing you'll hear tonight, but he said that in actual science now, in quantum mechanics, Einstein has shown that matter is really just energy, but also that our experience is actually changing so rapidly we can't comprehend it. Every millisecond there's these millions and maybe billions of chemical reactions going on at speeds that we can't comprehend, and that Maizumi says, we actually are being born and dying 70,000 times every second. So there's just this continual flow that we can't comprehend at speeds that we can't comprehend. So just open to this possibility. I mean, the awesomeness and the wondrous nature of this life that we are. And if that's true, we don't do anything. We don't do the meditation. We don't do this life by ourselves. This life is just happening. And that becomes more and more our actual experience. And when we become more and more at peace with that, we realize that we don't even do the offering of all of our experience to the Buddhas or the surrendering. Instead of doing it, we join. We learn how to join the surrendering, the dissolving, and the transforming of all of our experience. It's always already happening. So we're joining this great river of impermanence, the river of our existence. And then we gradually realize, he says, we can't stop our mind, right? At the end here. But we can recognize the stillness and silence that includes all of our experience, that is completely one with all experience, includes our thinking. And when we, contemplate what Hakuin said, our thought now being no thought, our voices in dancing, or our singing and dancing, are the voice of the Dharma. So, our thought being no thought, we don't know what it is. We don't know what thinking is, but it doesn't have the power to create any separation between us and Buddha, between us and our life, our very life. So our thinking becomes transparent to our essential being, and we realize gradually the freedom to not have to be burdened by it. So we don't have to stop it. We don't have to do anything. Just don't pay attention to it. Don't grasp at it. And we don't need to reject it. So we allow gradually, we allow to learn that the manifestation of realization is always here, present all times. And so we ask, how do we take care of this for ourselves? Well, we keep these questions in mind. Accept the fact that we don't know, and live these questions in all aspects of our life. And he says, if we do our daily activities wholeheartedly, in the spirit of the heart of the whole, that's wholehearted, put all our energy into it, and we'll realize tremendous strength. Then we can appreciate this very life as the manifestation of realization. So, we have lots of time for questions, comments, whatever. Thank you.
Thank you for your talk. I appreciate it. I have a question. So do we encounter our essential self when we meet the resistance and we touch the resistance and we are aware of the dualistic thinking? Thank you.
Oh, do we encounter it? Is that what your question is? I heard you clearly, but do we encounter it? Well, yes and no. I mean, we're always in the face of it. Like I was saying, its nature is ever present. So it's always present. It's never not present. So we're never not encountering it. But encounter implies dualism, See how like one thing is encountering another thing, but it's really beyond the dualistic me and it. So we're never not encountering it, put it that way. Is that good enough? Is that clear? I mean, it's not... You know what I'm trying to say, right?
I know what you're trying to say, and this is where I think sometimes when we listen, sometimes it's processed through thoughts instead of like being. So I'm trying to listen to being, but I guess what I'm trying to understand is too. I understand what you're saying, but I can't explain it. But also, when we encounter all of this, or not, encounter is not the right word, when we live all of it.
Yeah. What about when we live all of it?
I guess some of the things just fall away. Like, it's not, like you said, it's not something we have to do, it's just something that occurs. But I guess what confuses me sometimes, or that catches me up sometimes, is I trip into my thoughts. So my body might understand it as one way, or feel it as one way, but then my thoughts go someplace else. So it's not learning, but it's also being with my body and being with what is, and not so much this. And it's a lot of practice.
Yeah. Well, open to the possibility that your being never changes whether you're in the presence of your thoughts or not. So you don't have to come back to anything. Just notice that you seem to be lost in thoughts, or notice that thinking is there, but your presence here and now is not affected by thinking or not thinking being present. One thing I was going to say, and I'll just try and say it briefly here that I somehow skipped over, is what's helped me over the years is when we hear this teaching of there's no separate self. It's not that there's no self, it's that there's no separate self. We don't do anything by ourselves, as Reb was saying. Is try and find your actual separate self. Where is the actual entity you are that is separate from all of this, from this universe that we're in? Where is that entity? Find it, and if you're really looking deeply, you'll admit that all you find are different thoughts about it, but you never find the actual thing, the actual separate thing. And that not finding is the finding of a new aliveness, the aliveness of Buddha's aliveness. It's Buddha's aliveness in us. Thank you.
Your talk reminded me of something someone once told me, which was each moment is the perfect moment. And at the time, I thought, well, what if I was in a head-on collision? Would that be the perfect moment? And the truth is, it would be. It's not that I like the moment or dislike the moment or think about the moment. It's just that I'm part of this larger presence that I can't separate myself from. And each moment that arises as it was meant to be. So that's really how, to me, that's what faith in Buddhism is, that each moment is the perfect moment, and I can't separate myself from the moment that arises, because everyone lives that moment. It's in different ways, in different forms. Someone like right now might be having dinner. They're living the same moment I'm living by sitting here, but it's the same moment, and it is the perfect moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very well said. And even to expand on that a little bit, it's like our thinking mind divides our presence into moments, but actually it's all just ever presence. Thought divides reality into moments, but there is no division between, because like we said, the now has no gaps. When you talked about no gaps, the now itself, it's always now. There's no gap in now. So there's no actual moments, separate moments. So it's all one. Yeah, it's all perfect, or else none of it's perfect, right? Yeah. What about the Zoomdo? Anybody in the Zoomdo want to say anything?
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
3/4 of a century is the perfect birthday.
There you go.
I really appreciate your talk and your insight. There was one line in this chapter that has stuck with me all week, is when he says practice is itself a fulfillment of the originally enlightened life. So as we sit in meditation, as we take our present moment awareness with us throughout each moment of the day, whether we're sitting or not, that is the enlightenment of the Buddha. And it's no different now as it was then. It's a subtle thing and it takes effort to keep that awareness alive, because it's easy for us to get lost in distraction, and our attention. Well, we should put our attention, for example, chopping broccoli or driving the car and all of that. But it's really hard to drive the car and at the same time think, this is the enlightened life. But the reality of that is an awesome thing. And I think it's, for me anyway, it's encouraging, because even as Gato said, I could be on my way to a car crash and that would be the perfect moment. Though I may not feel that way at the time, could even be dead, But it's just these concepts are difficult to grasp and impossible to grasp intellectually. But over time, with practice, we begin to embody it and we feel it, we intuit it, and it's not anything that we can explain. It's just only something we can experience.
Right. Yeah, very well said. That faith in our actual experience of our essential being as the realized life in the face of the mystery and in the face of difficulties. So we don't have to expect us to do the surrendering or expect us to feel okay about being in a car crash. Our bodies are, conditioned to survive, so we're not going to feel okay about it, but open to the possibility that the ever-present compassion of the Buddha never goes away. It doesn't begin and doesn't end.
So the word that I'm feeling as all of this has been expressed is the word acceptance. So I'm feeling even like acceptance of even the thoughts that are occurring in my mind, because to separate or to judge my thoughts would be taking away from the moment. So like accepting the thoughts, accepting the situation, accepting where I am in this moment. I don't know, that just word keeps ringing in my head as everyone's speaking, and not to, like even thoughts, like even sometimes when you meditate, you feel like, oh, I'm supposed to not think. But really, I would just allow the acceptance of the thoughts as opposed to trying to separate everything, right? I don't know, that's what I'm feeling.
Yes, right. I mean, thought doesn't have the power to separate anything. But somehow our thinking minds get hypnotized and we believe our thoughts. We think that our thoughts create something separate, or they actually interfere with the ever-present awareness that we are. But that's why we sit over and over again for years and years, and then finally we realize that thinking doesn't have the power. Thinking is like a shadow that comes and goes and it follows us around, but it has no power over any of us. The fact of thought energy occurring is inconsequential to real practice. As long as we don't try to grasp them, as long as we don't let them, we just be aware and confess our losing our awareness, and that helps to melt the root of our resistance, of our wanting to grasp, because we can't grasp thinking. We don't know what it is.
We are coming to the end of our time. Would anyone else like to offer insights, ask questions?
Maybe sing happy birthday?
Yes, I was just going to mention that. Pam, you can lead.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Shikhan. Happy birthday to you.
And many more.
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate that.
So are we ready for the closing vow?
Creations are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to transform them. Reality is boundless. I vow to receive it. The enlightened way is unsurpassable. I vow to embody it. Creations are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to transform them. Reality is boundless. I vow to receive it. The enlightened way is unsurpassable. I vow to embody it. Creations are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions
delusions are inexhaustible. Our power to transform